Hello, good evening. This is the Gin and Tonic Show. It is Friday. It is the 25th of October, and we are 3 minutes late. I'm sorry. I did too many things. It's a personal thing. I agreed to do too many things and then simply ran out of time. It was a matter of having a family member, my mother-in-law, now also um, apparently she's also got cancer, the same thing that her husband had, who died a couple of weeks ago, and now this is the same thing. So now I need to somehow bring all the pieces together and help everybody who is now desperate and ailing and blah blah blah. So there's a lot of things going on. Anyway, this is the Gin and Tonic Show, and we are talking about Islam. And today is going to be a particularly interesting episode, I hope. So welcome to the panel. Welcome, Faye. Welcome, Thunderous.
Hi.
Hey,
How's your week been?
one of servitude and prostitution to a fascist white regime.
Thank you for that. And you, Faye, what are you up to?
I'm between jobs at the moment, so I've just been job searching, and my dog died of cancer. So
Oh no,
cancer all around.
Oh goodness. And like I said the other day, it's quite funny that somebody asked me, okay, has anybody here not been affected by cancer? And I was always the one to say, yes, I have not been affected. Nobody in the family and friends, nobody in any relationship with me has ever had cancer. Now suddenly it's like dung, 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 dung. It's quite amazing. Well, I'm very sorry to hear that. It's I think it's a fact of life. This is something that we have to face, something that we have to live with, and that is something that is part of reality. And this is where I think a lot of theists are like a little bit better off, I think, who can say, well, there's a higher power and there's somebody who can take care of things. So at least this is the way that I think. Obviously, I cannot think the way that a theist thinks, but this is what I imagine a theist may think. Sorry, Thunderous, do you have a special way of handling death?
No, because I got a strange feeling if whatever I mention now, it'll get thrown back in my face in a few weeks.
Okay, so don't. All right, we
Cautious,
get it.
cautious suggests I'd be cautious.
Okay. All right, then welcome to the chat. It's lovely to see people there. It's really lovely to see that people are interested, that people spend time here, that take time out of their schedule and say, well, it's a Gin and Tonic show. I want to learn something about Islam. I want to contribute. I want to ask. I want to do something with Islam. And then they come here and spend time with us. And I think it's such a wonderful feeling. So thank you.
It is.
Welcome to the chat. Remember, you can listen and follow and participate with the Gin and Tonic Show, either on YouTube or on Facebook. If you want to follow the live stream, the live show, this is on Fridays, 8 p.m. UK time. I don't even know. Yeah, we're going to keep it 8 p.m. UK time. We're not going to go with time changes into whatever. We're just going to keep it 8 p.m. UK time. So I think it's the easiest. And what was I saying? It's 8 o'clock and it's on Facebook and it's on YouTube, and this is the live show, so that you can watch this and you can make comments, you can write to us, you can ask questions, you can correct us, you can do anything you want on there. The other thing that you can do is then watch them on YouTube or on Facebook, and you can go to the archive and then rewatch them later. If you want to interact, either come to the live show or you can leave comments when you watch it later. We do occasionally go and look at the the past episodes to see what people are commenting or not. So if you want anything, but the best way to get hold of us is always via YouTube or via Facebook. Okay, so let's kick off. We're going into the Quran. So why are we doing this? I'm going to keep it very short today. It's the Gin and Tonic Show. Jinn, as in the what would you want to call them? Imaginary creatures, which are the demons and devils and all sorts of things that you get in Islam. if you hear a funny or something like this now in your microphone, in your headphone or in your loudspeakers, this means there's a jinn somewhere in the line. So there's a lot of superstition around this. So I've heard this. Don't laugh. I've heard all of this. So what we do is we address what we think is Islam. Okay, we differentiate, however, between what the followers do and say and believe and So in other words, we don't criticize and we don't attack the people. What we do is we don't even attack Islam or the Quran or something. We just go and address what we find there. We quote the Quran. Now, this is not being anti-Islam. This is not being anti-Muslim. This is not anti-anything. We're just looking what we find there. And then after we have found something in the Quran, in the secondary text, in the tertiary text, in the interpretations, in what the scholars say, and then we make up our mind, and then we come and, present our conclusions. So it's not our fault. I mean, if the Quran makes a mistake, then I didn't write this. I'm just pointing it out. So I'm not attacking, I'm not anti, I'm not doing anything. Now, where I am anti is when it comes to oppression, when it comes to misogyny, when it comes to slavery, when it comes to those things. And I think there we all agree. So this is how we address Islam. We're not attacking anything. We're just, normal, decent human beings who are just looking at an ideology, and mostly a political ideology. And that's it. So what we're going to do today is go and look at Quran chapter 4 and sentence number 11, because we did the first 10 sentences last week. And then today we're going to go.
Me?
Yeah, I don't know how we did it, but we battled through, and then that's it. So I need to find now, because I'm a little bit out of it, a little bit late, a little bit everything. I need to quickly find the Quran chapter 4, chapter 1, chapter 11. Here we go. And I'm going to give it to you with the Arabic, with everything. There we go. All right, so now I just need to share the screen, and then Faye can go crazy, because this is another nice thing that I need to point out. We have with us Faye, the most gorgeous, the most gracious, the most everything. Aww. And she is capable of actually reading this in Arabic. So you can't come and say, well, you don't speak ancient Arabic or something, you don't know what the Quran says. Well, sorry guys, there's somebody here who does know how to do that and who is going to do this. And Faye, go right ahead.
That is a long verse. Do
you want to skip it rather and take the shorter one later?
No, I'll take this one.
Or maybe I should say, yeah, Vish, listen, maybe I should sing along in English.
You want to sing along at the same time?
Well, the first word is Allah, right?
No.
Oh, shit. Because in the translations, it's Allah. Allah instructs you concerning your children. I don't know how to do it. Okay,
all right, on. Let me read the Arabic, and then you can sing the English. يوصيكم الله في أولادكم للذكر مثل حظ الأنثيين فإن كنا نساء فوق اثنتين فلهن ثلث ما ترك وإن كانت واحدة فلها النصف ولأبويه لكل ولد منهما السدس مما ترك إن كان له ولد فإن لم يكن له ولد وورثه أبواه فلأمه الثلث فإن كان له إخوة فلأمه السدس من بعد وصية يوصي بها يوصي بها أو دين آباؤكم وأبناؤكم لا يدرون أيهم أقرب لكم نفعا فريضة من الله إن الله كان عليما حكيما.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, and that brings us to the end of the Gin and Tonic show for this Friday. I hope you had fun.
That was a long
Very-
verse.
And the amount of time we're going to be taking trying to discuss this verse means it really is the end of the Gin and Tonic show.
But this was brilliant, and okay, maybe this is a good time to point out that we are not pretending. Faye is not pretending, and nobody here is claiming that she is in any way a native ancient Arab speaker. She has not studied ancient Arab, because I mean she just knows how to read this and she understands it. All right, so that this is not an expert. This is not a scholar. That there is no claim in this direction made. Okay, so just to be very, very clear on this. So I appreciate it, Faye. Thank you very much. I think it does bring a lot to people to hear what the original actually sounds like. That people say, well, this is beautiful, and this is, I think it can be, if you listen to the rhyme, if you listen to the rhythm and things like that. But otherwise, I don't think it's a beautiful language. I don't think Arabic is like, because if you listen to Thai, Italian, Russian, Hungarian, soft languages, you know, like operas are being written in these languages because they are so soft. And if you take a language like Dutch or Afrikaans, German, French, they're not so soft. A lot of people tell me French is soft, but no, it's not. Russian is soft.
French
oh yeah,
isn't
very.
soft.
Russian
I
is
find
very
French
soft.
quite aggressive as a language.
Exactly, yeah. And Russian, yeah, I used to speak Russian, and Russian is quite a soft language. Okay, so we have different types of languages, and I don't particularly like Arabic. I think it's a hard language, and it doesn't appeal to me. But this is a personal thing, all right? This is not something that you can take as a judgment. You can take as an objective anything, because there's no unit in beauty or in appealing or in whatever. So it can be moving, it can be something, but that's personal preference. Islam Safari says
someone said I'm going
pre-Arabic.
to be a Muslim by the end of the stream.
Yeah, that's quite good. Eh? Now, pre-Arabic poets were great and revered. This is a problematic sentence, statement, claim, because the Arabic language was not codified before the Quran came out, because you had different. Obviously, we had Aramaic, and we had the Nabatean version of. So we had different Syriac, different versions of the language, and the north spoke a different Arabic than the south. So if you went to Yemen, or what today is Yemen or today is Oman, they spoke a different dialect. So it's like German and Dutch and something like this. And therefore, the Quran came around and codified it. Then we have what today is the Al Jazeera Arabic, the standard, modern standard Arabic, the MSA. This is a far cry. So it's like ancient Greek and modern Greek. There are similarities, and yes, it hasn't changed all that much, not as much as ancient Greek and modern Greek, but you can't really compare it. So the pre-Arabic poets that are being claimed that they were using the language, as we go and investigate this, we see that these claims are unfounded, that these poems attributed to those people are not actually from those people. So we find that more and more that, yes, the Quran is the origin, is the codification that happened at the time. Okay, that's just a quick side note. Now, what is it that Faye has been, singing, reciting, telling us? And by the way, singing is not haram at all. It is only music, as in with instruments and that. So the human voice.
Haram for women. It is for women.
Is it haram for women to sing?
Yeah, because voice is aura.
I didn't even know that. Thank you. Wow, because I would have said no, voices in general. Okay, so it's only male voices that are not. So it's no. Okay. So far as she knows how to sing, but are we getting to the words now? Yep. Now I'm going to do the Sahih one. Allah instructs you. I don't know how it instructs you concerning your children. Okay, this is already funny, but let's just go through it. Allah instructs you concerning your children. For the male, what is equal to the share of 2 females. But if there are daughters, 2 or more, for them is 2/3 of one's estate. And if there is only one, for her is half. And for one's parents, to each one of them is 1/6 of his estate if he left children. But if he had no children and the parents inherit from him, then for his mother is 1/3. And if he had brothers, for his mother is 1/6, and any bequest made or debt. Your parents or your children, you know not which of them are nearest to you in benefit. And then it's in bracket, these shares are an obligation by Allah. Indeed, Allah is ever knowing and wise.
If only we had Benny here.
Sorry?
If only we had Benny here, this would have been a good conversation. He would have been saying exactly the entire time.
Can you
He would,
imagine trying to work out the maths with Benny? Trying to work out the fractions or subtractions of the inheritance law with Benny?
Well, I tried one single sentence and he wasn't capable of doing that. So Yusuf Ali says, this is Allah directs you as regards your children's, well, inheritance, to the male, a portion equal to that of 2 females. That seems to be very important because it's right in the beginning. If only daughters, 2 or more, their share is 2/3 of the inheritance. If only one, her share is 1/2. For parents, a 1/6 share of the inheritance to each, if only deceased left children. If no children and the parents are the heirs, the mother has 1/3. If the deceased left brothers or some sisters or whatever, the mother has 1/6. The distribution in all cases after the payment of legacies. Okay, there's something funny. Okay, after the payment of legacies and debts, ye know not whether your parents or your children are nearest to you in benefit. These are settled portions ordained by Allah, and Allah is all-knowing, all-wise. Now, exactly. Now, the thing is, what we need to do here is we need to wait, stop it, thinking clearly, stop it.
Stop.
This was not me just reading. This is okay. So what we need to do is we need to add the second part of this. Okay. Now I'm not going to let you read the whole thing. Let's just go straight into this because it just continues. And for you is half of what your wives leave if they have no child. But if they have a child, for you is 1/4 of what they leave after any bequest made or debt. And for the wives is 1/4 if you leave no child. But if you leave a child, then for them is 1/8 of what you leave after any bequest you made of debt. And if a man or woman leaves neither ascendants nor descendants, but has a brother or a sister, then for each one of them is 1/6. But if they are more than 2, they share 1/3 after any bequest which was made or debt, as long as there is no detriment. An ordinance from Allah, and Allah is knowing and forbearing. Now, we will get to a third one later on, but I think we can leave it and just go with these 2 for the time being and just focus on this for a moment. Now, let me go to the Yusuf Ali because the Sahih is even worse, I think. If I take the Yusuf Ali translation, then what we're doing is, this is, okay, Allah, which is God, directs you. In other words, we are being told something about our children's inheritance. And the most important thing is, to the male, a portion equal to that of 2 females. In other words, the male gets double what the females get. Now,
yeah.
I think we're very clear about this here. Or are there any questions open here?
I've got no questions.
Rob is here. Okay, let me quickly add him to the stream because he's following on the mobile while he's driving. So don't be.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me? Good evening.
Yes, excellent. Very well.
Yeah, big storm out here in the UK, in southern
Oh,
UK.
shit.
So driving through a storm, but with heavy traffic. But yeah, that means I'm in the car. So great to be with you guys. How are you all doing?
Hey, Rob,
Great
long
stuff.
time.
Doing well. How are you?
Yes, very busy. I've got contract work every week, normally on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or something like that. So that's why I haven't been around as much, unfortunately. But I'm here now, and we're on my favorite. So I'm going to leave it there for the moment.
Listen, Rob, but listen, you really need to take care. You need to focus on the road.
I am.
Because Rob and I were talking about cars, and I'm lucky that mine has this autopilot thing where I don't need to go and do anything. It keeps the lane, it does the corners, it keeps the distance, it keeps the speed, it does everything automatically. So I don't need to pay so much attention. And
You have a Tesla?
no. There are other cars that do that as well. There's not only a Tesla. Others are catching up.
But
So
you're making bank
anyway,
if you have
so
a Tesla.
what we have is we're talking. I just want Rob to to pay attention to the road, because this is absolutely amazing. This is the Quran, which is why I don't know if you've noticed the title that I've given to the show. I mean, is this really now an error that is going to make you, or should this make you an ex-Muslim? Because remember, we have some claims regarding the Quran, that there is no doubt in it, that there are no mistakes, there are no contradictions. It's clear, it's easy to understand, easy to remember, and it's explained, and everything is so clear. And so all these claims need to be, well, at the back of your mind when you are looking at this. Now, why I love this specific sentence is there is very little open to interpretation, because it is mathematical. You cannot interpret 2/3. Okay, 2/3. You can't argue 1 + 1 = 2. You simply cannot go and make some sort of interpretation so that 1 and 1 = 58 or something. You can't do that. So 1 and 1 is going to be 2, and because it's mathematics that we're talking about, it is absolute. Now, there's very little that I maintain is absolute, but it's absolute. Now, what it says here is that Allah directs you as regards your children's inheritance. So to the male, a portion equal to that. So there's no questions. The male gets double. Now, if we say only daughters, so if you have children, directs you as regards your children. So if you have only daughters, 2 or more. Now this is already a mistake.
Yep.
Because that's not what the Quran says. If you go back to what Faye was just reciting, what is this portion here? Can you do this, or should we go to the roots?
Which portion? Like all of
The
it?
first sentence. The first, because here you have Allah. Allah directs you to the male, the portion of 2 females, and then how does it carry on? What are the first things that you get when it talks about specifics?
So the word mithla or thuluth, that means third.
Before that,
And unthayain.
how many daughters?
Sorry?
How many daughters?
Unthayain is 2 daughters. Unthayain is 2 daughters.
Okay, because if you go and look at it, here instructs you, Allah, concerning your children, for the male, like portion of 2 females, all right? And now, but
Yeah.
if there
So
are
there's the word for
only
2
women,
females,
so the Nisa is the women. So if there's only women, in other words, only daughters, and it says...
No. Unthayain, so the word that you have at the bottom of the screen right now, the blue one, that one is 2, so 2 females.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't say 2 or more.
No, 2.
It says more than 2.
Dual genitive nouns. Falca would mean more. Yeah, but the actual word means 2 females. It's a dual term.
Which one? This dual
Unsayin.
genitive noun.
Yeah.
It says more than two.
Yeah.
Okay, this is exactly my point. Because what they are translating is two or more. No, it
Yeah.
doesn't say that. It says more than two. And this is the funny thing. The case where there are two daughters is being excluded. So this does not exist in the Quran. It's only more than two. So you need to be very careful when you construct an example, that you need to understand that the sentences, the way that how they are being translated, are in most cases an interpretation. So if you look at the literal word by word, it doesn't say two or more. It says more than two.
Yeah.
So that's it. There's no such thing as two daughters. So if only daughters, more than two. But this is now clear. Their share is 2/3 of the inheritance. So it's not a piece of the inheritance. It's not a portion. It's not a remainder. It is 2/3 of the entire inheritance. I don't think there's any question that there's nothing here that you can interpret. Their share is 2/3 of the inheritance. There's no way that this is general, that this is that you can say, well, this is just a metaphorical view or something. Their share is 2/3. This is a God telling you the share of the women is 2/3.
When you pointed this out 2 weeks ago to Benny and his friend in the Discord chat, I don't understand what they were missing, because this verse is quite clear. I mean, besides the fact that the maths doesn't add up at all, the verse is quite clear.
Yeah, because
I think what they were missing, Faye, is they seem to think that these are all distinct scenarios and you cannot add them together, which is obviously completely lunacy, right? The whole reason this verse is here is so that you can use the various parts of the verse to add them together when you have different families. And they thought, no, it doesn't apply because they are each separate scenarios, which is, they don't understand their own Quran.
And the thing, what this Dr. Haytham was saying, or Dr. Haytham, I cannot call him a doctor. He's not.
Stops. Before you go into that, should we go through this and then go through all the objections at the end? Otherwise, we kind of half do it.
He was just saying that it's talking about the daughters and where's the wife come? She only comes in later. I said no. I'm only making a case of a father and 3 daughters. That's it. And he couldn't understand that because he says, but this carries on. So the way that it works is if you have only daughters, in other words, you're a guy, you're a man, and you have only daughters, let's say 3 daughters, okay? And their share is 2/3. If there's only 1 daughter, her share is a half of the inheritance. Now, this sounds very fair because if you have 3 daughters, they get 2/3. So each one gets, like a sizable portion. And if there's only 1, she gets a half. A little bit less than the 2/3 because she's alone. So this, like intuitively, it makes sense if you think about it. Now, if we continue, if you have parents, then they get a 1/6 of the share of the inheritance, not of what is left, not of anything. It's the inheritance. So they get a 1/6. So the daughters get a 1/3, half, whatever, and the parents a 1/6. If the deceased left children. So in other words, if he had daughters, then this applies. So the parents get a 1/6 of the share if the deceased left children. However, if the deceased had no children, then the parents are the only heirs, the mother has a 1/3. They don't tell you what the father gets. Now, if you apply that the mother has a 1/3 and the man gets double what the mother gets, we've already got a problem. Actually, no, if they are the only heirs, no, then this is correct. If they are the only heirs, the mother gets a 1/3 and the father gets 2/3, which is then the inheritance. Correct. So in a case where there's a guy who only has parents and he dies for some reason or kills himself doing whatever, playing, I don't know, in the well, then they get the mother the 1/3 and the father 2/3. Great. So here it fits. If the deceased left brothers or sisters, the mother, his mother, gets a sixth. The distribution, okay, here it's a little bit unclear, after the payment of legacies and debts. So in other words, whatever legacies and debts you have, they always need to be paid. Okay, that's always the case. And you know not, and now this is where I get puzzled. You don't know whether your parents or your children are nearest to you in benefit.
I think
Comment, please.
I think that line is just there to stop any kind of argument about who gets what.
You don't
So these
know
are-
whether your parents or your children are nearest to you.
Yeah. So someone might like argue, I don't know who, but someone might argue, oh, my children deserve more, my parents deserve more. But because these are preset inheritance shares, they're saying that you don't know what's best for you. Allah knows what's best for you.
Aha, okay. Okay, I get it. Thank you. You don't, because there's a, it should be, see, this ye should be, because you don't know whether your parents or children, these are the settled portions ordained by Allah.
Yeah.
Because Allah knows better. Okay, that makes sense. You're right. Okay. Are the tafsirs giving us anything different here?
Probably.
So Allah is a male of the inherent concerning the inheritance to the male the equivalent portion of two. So he's just repeating what the Quran says: 2 or more daughters, then 2/3, one daughter, then half, to his parents of six. So he's not adding anything. He's just saying that your parents, ye know not in this world which of them is nearer here. It is also said that this means you do not know which of them is nearer in usefulness in this world with regard to inheritance. So it's up to Allah upon you that you divide the estates in relation to the division of the inheritance in relation to the difference between the shares of the male and the female. So this is only between the male and the female. The Jalalain's matter of your children receive 2/3. So he's also just, he's then referring to the last sentence of chapter 4, that they are entitled. And so what they're mainly saying is, okay, there's a justification for the male getting more than the female.
Yeah.
So this is it. So if we go now and do the same thing with number 12, we see that I'll also go to what your wives leave, your share is a half. So in what your wives leave, so in other words, if you have a wife, let's make it very easy, then if she dies, you get half. If you don't have any children, or if she, remember, there's a lot of cases where a woman loses the husband in a war, and then, or in a battle or something, and then she's without a man, and that can't be, so somebody else takes her and marries her, so that she has some sort of, legitimation. And maybe she had a child when she came into the marriage, and if now she dies, if she has a child, then and she has no child, then your share is half. But if she does have a child or did have a child, then you only get a quarter of the payment of legacies and debts, which seems intuitively fair, because then the child should also get some money because it's the woman's child. In what you leave, their share is a fourth if you leave no child. Now, this is in what ye leave. In other words, this is now switching from in what your wife leaves to in what you leave. So this is now going back to what we had in 411, in what you are leaving. So this is the women dealt with, and now it's going back to you. So their share is a fourth. In other words, their share is a fourth, their share being, I think, the wives. I don't understand what this means. In what ye leave, their share is a fourth, if you leave no child. So I think what happens is, in what your wives leave, your share is a half, but in what you leave, their share is a fourth, if you don't leave a child. This is the way that
their share would be the wife's share.
That's how I
if
understand.
You die. Yeah.
Because I said in what your wives leave.
Yeah.
This is this, and in what you leave. So these are two separate cases. This is how I understand it anyway.
Even in the chapter of the women, God is addressing men.
Yeah.
Stop. So is that absolutely the case? Because if you read on, it specifically talks about the wives. So it might be that it's just the way it's written. And it's still talking about the husband there, whether the husband has children or no children. Are you sure about that? I can't see it because I'm obviously driving.
Yeah.
But are you
Well-
sure
No,
that it's we're referring there?
Yeah, the
Because
first
it's
part is for the
addressing men.
wives, if the wife has a child or no child.
Oh,
And
okay.
now
Cool.
we get what the man has if he has no child. Then the women get a fourth. But if you have a child, then the wives only get an eighth
Yes. Okay. That's the right part. Yeah.
after payment of legacies and debts. Okay. So if the man or woman whose inheritance is in question has left neither ascendants nor descendants, but has left a brother or a sister, each one gets a sixth. So in other words, if either first it was what your wives leave, then it was what the man leaves, and now it is if either dies without any parents or any children, but with a brother or a sister, doesn't matter whether it's a brother or a sister, then they get a sixth.
Mhm.
But if they have more than two, they share a third. In other words, more than two brothers or sisters. Any other opinions?
Nope.
Then they share a third after payment of legacies and debts. Okay. So that no loss is caused to anyone, thus is ordained by Allah, the all-knowing, most forbearing. Thunderous, do you have any comments on this?
No, I'm going to be honest with you. I never came across this until I came across some of your material a couple of years ago. So from you is the first time I heard the discrepancy in the numerical figures. Because when I read the Quran, it never came across my mind to actually even consider looking at the numbers to see if they tally up.
Correct. All right. What Thunderous is saying, because I did this like, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. Because I read this, and then because I have an inquisitive mind, I tried to understand this, and I then realized I cannot explain this without coming up with an example. And then I made an example, and I found, excuse me, sorry, what? And then I went a little bit further, and then I came across different examples and different things, and this is why then I came. Okay, let's quickly show you. Let me quickly go into an example. What I have done. No, let me first show you what Rob has done. Because what Rob has done, he said, because I went into these examples of inheritance. This is what Rob has done. And this is very nice. Okay, so can everybody see this? Or is this too small?
We can't see it. It's in your screen. It's not on the main screen.
Sorry.
There you go. That works.
Can I make this a little bit smaller? No. I can do it like this. Can you still read this?
Yep.
Okay. So if I say, let's take 411, then the highlighted part is the mathematical area. So if only daughters, two or more, their share is 2/3. So we have 2/3. For parents, a sixth. So we have a fraction here, a sixth. And the condition is if he has children. Well, he's left daughters, there are children, so this applies. And if we take that, then these are the settled portions ordained by Allah. Allah is all-knowing, all-wise. So if we take the shares the way that they are, well, actually commanded, that they are being like ordained, like that this is decreed that these are the shares. Okay, 2/3 for the women, the daughters, if there's 3 of them, and for parents they get a sixth. Okay, so that's very, very clear. And then if you go to 412, if you leave a child, okay, yes, because we have 3 daughters, then they get an eighth. So in other words, the wife gets an eighth in what your wives leave. So in other words, we just said if the wife dies, then you get a half. But if you die and you leave a child, then you get an eighth. So if we now take these things and just take some just as an example, we can then find out whether or not this makes any kind of sense. Now, if you go to, let me now go to my example before we compare this to what the Sharia says. What I do is I say, okay, let me go and enter this as a thought model, okay? So I'm saying, let us create an example where I have the parent, I have the father, the male in the family, and the family consists of the husband, the wife, 3 daughters, and then he has his parents. It's a very simple example, okay? So it's just a small family, father, mother, 3 daughters, and the parents, and that's it. So if I say the estate consists of 9 oranges, so I have a third, and a third, and I now go and apply Sharia, and I apply what it says here, then I should be able to see if only daughters, 2 or more, their share is 2/3 of the inheritance. So I should be able to see now, if I apply this, what this looks like. So if I take 9 oranges and I say the share of the daughters, 3 daughters, is 2/3, then we have 1/3, 2/3. This makes up 6 oranges. If I visualize it using just oranges. So if I now go and take the next sequence, I say for parents, a 1/6 share of the inheritance to each if the deceased left children. Now, the father, we saw, he is the one who died. So did they have children? Yes, they had 3 daughters. So we said we have the family, father, mother, 3 daughters. The father dies. He had parents. The male parent gets a 1/6. The female parent gets a 1/6. So in other words, they get 2/6. So a 1/6 and a 1/6 is 2/6. So this makes up 2/6 equals 1/3. And now the thing is that if you go to 412, if you leave children, your wives shall inherit 1/8. So in other words, if we visualize this again using the oranges, we have the result that we have not only the 9 oranges, but we have more. Because we have 2/3 for the daughter, 1/3 for the parents, which is a 1/6 and a 1/6 is 2/6 is 1/3. So that's 2/3 here, 1/3 here. Where does the additional 1/8 for the wife come from? Where Allah instructs you, Allah makes clear to you. And this is
obviously the short answer to that is that is impossible. You cannot have more than 100% of your inheritance because it wouldn't be your inheritance. And we'll get to some of the objections or some of the quote solutions that are proposed. Stops. Hopefully you can get that one on Skype that I sent you, at least the bottom part of that as well. Because even an atheist
I'm going to that now. I'm going to that now.
Okay.
Don't worry. I'm just saying this is the visualization, because now I'm going to show the visualization where you have this box of 9 oranges, which was the estate, and we have an extra. Now, this could be me. This could be me making a mistake. This could be me saying, well, I hate Islam, I'm an Islamophobe, and this is me, I'm misconstruing it, I'm not reading this correctly. But we saw that it's 2/3 for 3 daughters. We saw that it's 1/6 plus 1/6 for 2 parents. So there's not much that you can do wrong. But let me be 100% sure and not use my rationale, don't use my logic, don't use my arithmetic here, which might be faulty. Let's enter the numbers into an Islamic Sharia-conform inheritance calculator. Now, this is an Islamic inheritance calculator according to the authentic Quran and Sunnah. Okay, this is not me. This is not a non-Muslim. This is not a kafir doing this. This is the way that the Islamic, the jurisprudence, the Sharia actually works. So if you enter the numbers, it's very easy to do this. You enter this, you have 1 wife, you have 3 daughters, you have 1 father, and you have 1 mother. That's it. a very small family, a very simple example. So it should be very easy to come to a result here. And what does the Islamic inheritance calculator come up with? It does the same thing. It says that the wife is oversubscribed, the daughter is oversubscribed, the father is oversubscribed, the mother. So in other words, it makes adjustments, proportional adjustments, saying that the wife suddenly does not get an eighth, but gets a ninth. The daughters don't get 2/3, but 16/27ths. The father doesn't get a sixth, but 4/27ths. The mother doesn't get 1/6, but 4/27ths, and so on. And then, of course, it adds up. Now, what you need to do after you've added it up, you need to understand what actually has happened, because it says here, according to authentic Quran and Sunnah. So if you go to the calculation steps, and if you go and you, let me see if I can zoom this in a little bit. Zup. So what it says here, the wife gets the prescribed share of 1/8, daughter gets 2/3, mother gets 1/6. So this is the way that it's supposed to work. But the total shares have exceeded 100%. This is the Islamic inheritance calculator. It says the shares have exceeded 100%. So the shares need to be reduced proportionally. Okay, so there's two different ways of reconciling this. This is how dishonest Muslims normally are, the apologists, because they will tell you, well, you just reduce it proportionally, and the second way is you take the remainders. So one is the proportional method, other one is deductive.
I would have really laughed if the calculator just went, Allah knows best, and just didn't give you an answer.
Yeah, because when you said an Islamic calculator, Sharia calculator, that's exactly what went through my mind, Faith.
Well, I'm not going to disappoint you, am I? Okay, because it says here, this is the awal case. So in the awal case, when the total is more than 1, all shares should be reduced proportionally so that the total shares is 1. And in case of awal, and the presence of grandfather, sisters will be removed from the 2/3 zone. Grandfather and sisters then will divide the ratio of 2:1, the disturbing case. So in other words, the people, the scholars, are aware of this, and they have a workaround, which is exactly this awal case where they are saying, okay, we have two different ways. Either we take the proportional or we take the the reduction method. And here they are going with the proportional method, where they're saying, if we enter this case, this example, this is the result, and we can see that it doesn't work. So because it doesn't work out, we need to reduce the shares. Now, this is a solution. This is a practical solution. This is the way that it works, and this is the way that it is applied in Islam today, and this is how it works. The problem is only that if you take the shares and reduce them, and if you go here and you see that the daughters get 16/27ths or 59%, the 59% is not equal to 66.667%. This is the problem. And now, if we look at the Quran, God, Allah, directs you that the share is 2/3 of the inheritance. But it doesn't work like that. So you need humans correcting the mistake. You need humans correcting the incompetence of whoever wrote the Quran, because they did not know how to handle fractions. And
I think the other thing stops to bear in mind here is that you do need to ask a few questions to Muslims prior to doing this. So if you're a non-Muslim and you want to test this on Muslims, and we'll talk about some of the responses that we've had and heard and so on, there are certain questions you must ask. If you just go say, hey, there's this error in 411 here, and you sort of jump in like that, I think that allows them to come up with some other excuse. So maybe we'll talk about that as well. There's certain things I say, I think maybe Stop says something similar. That's a setup. In other words, like a few questions before you get to this.
Yeah, if you want to use it, there's some groundwork. Yeah. Okay, so the way that it works is you see that you have the estate consisting of 9 oranges, and you see that even the most simple example of only a family with 3 daughters, that's it. No, we're not going to go into complicated matters with the if there's a brother now, he gets double and they get half, because then it gets really complicated, and then it goes totally out the window. But we're trying to be very fair. We're trying to make it very, very simple, not making it complicated so that people can't follow anymore, and they will say, well, you need to be a scholar to work this out. No, we're making it very, very simple. So you need to ask, what is the share of a daughter? Well, it's a half. What if there's 3 daughters? Well, then it's 2/3. Okay, so it makes sense. So what is the share of the parents? Well, it's 1/6 plus 1/6. There you have it. It's all in 411. How much is the wife? Well, you go to 412. There it is, 1/8. Okay, now add this up for me. Well, I don't know arithmetic. Well, I said, this is why I then said, well, take the 9 oranges. How much is 2/3? Well, we know this is 6. 1/3, 1/3 plus 1/3. There you go. So what 2/3 is 6 oranges. 1/6 plus 1/3 is 2/6. Everybody knows it's 1/3. 3 oranges. So there's the estate gone. 2 oranges, 2/3 plus 1/3 is 1. So the estate is gone. So where does the 1/8 come from? This is the way that it works. And then you can go into the Islamic calculator and show how this is built up, how this works if you have different things. Now, I've done other examples as well, where if you, for example, you have only the husband and the son, if you have, the simplest example is if you have only a man and a sister. How much did the sister get? Well, we saw in one example, it says that, here in 412, it says man, and so on. So there's different, combinations, different models that you can build. But this is a very, very simple one. So if you go and you start off by saying, well, is what it says in the Quran, is it binding? Yes. What is more, what has a higher authority? Is it Muhammad or is it Allah? Well, it's Allah. Okay, so if Muhammad says they get 1/3 and the Quran says they get 2/3, which is the one that you need to take? Well, the Quran with 2/3. So that is binding, yes. What happens if you don't obey what Allah tells you? Well, we can see that in the Quran that you're destined for hell. If you don't listen, if you don't obey what Allah and Muhammad have decreed. Now, in this case, Muhammad and Allah are at odds with each other. So you can't miss this. You need to go and you say, okay, if you allow what Allah says to be the law of the world for you today, how are you going to live by the Quran if this is the case? Are you going to come to me and say, well, I have contemplated what it says in the Quran. I've decided that everything in there is correct. There's not a single mistake in there. There's not a single inconsistency. There is no in any shape or form a contradiction in the entire Quran. Well, if you see this, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Are you going to be honest, or are you going to start lying? Oh, I see our favorite village idiot is here. This is extremely easy to explain. There are non-Muslims trying to explain this without understanding about what they are talking. No Muslim on the panel. Muslims with knowledge are ignored. Okay, if you bring a Muslim with knowledge, great. You don't have the knowledge. You don't even know what the Quran says. You're a joke. So if you have somebody who understands the Quran, please go ahead, bring him here. Tell us, anybody, bring them here. Tell them, okay, we want to talk to them. Bring them here. So this is, it's crazy. How can anybody say you can explain this away? This is the beauty of mathematics. This is why I love the arithmetic side here, because you cannot explain away 2/3. 2/3 is 2/3. And you cannot say, well, the Quran says the women, the daughters, get 2/3. And then of the remainder, the parents get 1/6 each. Because that is the other way there, because the one is the proportion rule. This is the Awal case, that the rule number 18 that we saw in the Sunnah. You have the second approach, which the Turkish people are bringing in, which is the reduction method, where you say, okay, they take 2/3. So in other words, 6 of the 9 oranges are gone. And now what happens is the next one gets 1/6 of this, of what is the remainder. Now, the thing is, this is stupid as well, because if you think it through, if you get the 6th and say, well, how much is left? Well, then there's something left. And now what? What happens if you take 2/3 of the wife, of the daughters, which is gone? So now you're left with 3 oranges, okay? Now, the parents get 1 orange and 1 orange each. And now there's 1 orange left, okay? Now the wife comes and she gets 1/8 of that orange. And what about the rest? Now, the funny thing is, these people ignore the Quran, okay? Because in the Quran, and here, this is very nice, what Rob has done here, is it says very clearly, this is what God wants you to do. And it doesn't say that of the remainder that they get this. They get 2/3 of the inheritance. And then if we look what the wife is of the inheritance. Where does it say? I can't find it. It's too big. So we're always looking at the whole inheritance. We're not looking at just a portion of this. We're always looking at the complete inheritance. That's what the Quran says. Now you can always go and say, okay, I don't care about the Quran, and this is the practical method. I agree with that, but then you can't say that the Quran is totally inerrant. You have to admit that there is something that humans need to contribute here to make sense of this.
Yeah, I agree with you, Stops. And I went, because I've tested this on Muslims Live in Speaker's Corner. I've done it here online, especially on Discord. We've done it here on the show as well in previous shows. But now we've gone really in depth into this. And it's very simple for me. I ask a Muslim first question. Is the Quran inerrant? In other words, is your claim, or is the Muslim claim, or is Islamic claim that the Quran contains no errors? And almost every Muslim I've ever spoken to, with the exception of one, says yes. There was one Muslim I spoke to that said, oh, I don't know if the Quran has errors. If somebody says that, or they are going to accept that the Quran has got errors, then this scenario won't work. They will just say, yes, it's an error, pretty much like the Christians. That's not the overwhelming Muslim view. It's an outlying view that the Quran might have, or in fact does contain errors. So I will ask them, so do you believe the Quran has no errors? And they will, 99 times out of 100, they'll say yes. I'll say, well, what if I were to bring you an error in the Quran that was irrefutable? What would that mean to you as a Muslim? Because I want to hear from them whether they are somebody that will take this on board, look at it, and then consider the options, i.e., what would that mean if there's no error? What I really am looking for is something along the lines of, okay, if there is an error and it's irrefutable, that means it couldn't have come from God, and therefore I cannot be a Muslim. I'll further say to them, though, okay, so if the Quran is your source and somebody comes along and modifies that, do you agree that that is not permitted, that's bid'ah, it's a sin, and it cannot be allowed? And they will, again, 99 times out of 100, say yes, they must say that. Because if they allow for the Quran to be modified, then, of course, this isn't an error. But they've got to agree that it's bid'ah, that is forbidden, and there are no errors in the Quran, and that if there was an error, then that for them would make it very problematic to be a Muslim. Once they've accepted that, then we can go into this, because we've had some of the discussions on it, which if you're ready, or when you're ready to stop, we'll go through with people trying to find a back door. So once you've asked these questions, you've closed any door that they can try and escape through with some sort of rhetoric or semantics or some other way of getting out of this.
Well, there's lots of examples, like what Kenny was saying. Well, does Adnan Rashid know the Quran? Is he somebody who is knowledgeable when it comes to issues in Islam? I think a lot of Muslims think so. I don't agree with them, but a lot of Muslims seem to think so. Look what happened when he was confronted with this. He ran as fast as he could. All he did is, did you read all the tafsirs explaining this? So
he's an imbecile, Stops. In this respect, he didn't even attempt to answer this. I have respect for somebody who says, hey, do you know what? I don't know. I've not looked into this deeply. I'm going to look at this and I'm going to come back to you. I've got no problem with that.
Absolutely.
But when you present something and you don't even attempt to answer it, and your entire response is to try and make the speaker look foolish, you've got no credibility, Myers. You're an absolute imbecile.
Then we have the philosopher, Muhammad Hijab. He was confronted with this. And he ran away as fast as he could. And he says, well, I don't know how to do this. I need to ask my elders. I need to ask the people who know. And he came back and he said, well, you need to adjust it. And his answer was, yes, you need to adjust it accordingly so that the daughters don't get 2/3, but they get 9/27 or whatever. And this is the problem. They are not getting 2/3. God says in the Quran, their share is 2/3. He did exactly what the Quran, what the Islamic inheritance calculator did. This is what the most scholars do today. They follow what it says in the Sharia today, and these are all four. Well, the madhabs are slightly different when it comes to the distribution, men and women and grandfathers and blah blah. But a simple example like this, all four madhabs do the same identical thing. So what the inheritance calculator is doing is calculating what humans think they should inherit, not what their God says. Their God says they should get 2/3.
Yeah. I think we also need to make clear, Stops, that these are rational. Well, when we say rational in the sense that they understand that anything more than 100% is impossible, and therefore to allow it to be the case in reality, somehow the numbers must be changed. That, of course, contradicts the Quran.
They're educated. They understand the concept, and they still still mess up.
Well, they've got to find a way to make it equal to 100%. Every other response, so some of the responses I've heard, one, from this Dr. Latham that we spoke to Stops and I on Discord, this doesn't even account for 15% of the total inheritance laws, right? So I'm not even going to address this example because there's so many other laws that I'm going to put my head in the sand like an ostrich, and I'm not even going to address this. As if some other law could come along. And let's say we were charitable and suggested there was some law that he could find and, make up along with the Quran. That would then contradict these verses. So even if you could find something else, that still doesn't help you. So that was one response. The other response was even more of a denial of this. Hey, it's the scholars thing. It's not for us to understand or know, which of course contradicts Surah 3:138, that this is a plain book and the message is clear to people. So that was another response. And then I did have one fella who went through this whole thing with me on Discord. I showed it to him. We went step by step. He's actually quite a nice guy in that sense. And he said to me, Rob, I cannot refute this, but I'm no good at mathematics and I'm still a Muslim. So at least he went through the whole thing. I did, I don't expect somebody to. I mean, it would be great because they'd be intellectually honest. I understand there's a whole thing around being a Muslim. The moment you give that up, as you guys will know, our ex-Muslim friends on the panel here will know, it's not just that you give up a single belief. Your entire world sort of almost comes crumbling. So I can understand, even if they give lip service to it and say, hey, that would be a problem for me as a Muslim, I understand that it probably won't be, just because they can't let it go. So those are some of the responses I've had when I've tested this on Muslims.
And you see, this is the difference exactly here. If somebody is honest and says, okay, look, I really don't know. And for me, and this is what happens in the Middle East, the people are saying, look, for me, it's not important that the 2/3 add up with 1/3 and this gives me one. For me, it's the concept that there's a God. For me, it's the concept that there's something out there which is more potent and more powerful than me, something that has provided the universe for us. And I'm doing, this is the typical Pascal's wager thing. I'm just going to do whatever needs to be done to be a good boy, and then I'm done and I have not lost anything. Whereas you, if you don't do anything, you lose. Now, we've all done the Pascal's wager that this is bullshit, but that's the way how they think. But at least they are being honest.
Well, I mean, are they though? Because you can get rid of those people by asking those questions I ask, right? Do you believe the Quran is inerrant? What would it mean to you as a Muslim if you found there was an error? And do you agree that any modification of the Quran is a sin and is not permitted? Because those people are like your cafeteria type Muslims. They call themselves Muslims. They like some of it, but they don't understand the Quran, or they don't adhere to it accurately. So for me, I wouldn't have a conversation with those people. I get rid of them immediately. They're not serious Muslims. Or certainly they're not serious in the sense that they don't follow the Quran accurately and concisely and word for word.
But Rob, that's 80% of Muslims.
Quite probably is, yeah. And in those cases, though, they've got a bigger problem, because if they don't take the Quran to that level, why do they believe it? Or are they just cherry picking? And so those people are intellectually inconsistent.
Yes, they are. But they're saying, I'm still going to
and
be...
that you can have it. They're just like a Christian you find on the street that isn't learned. Like I know a guy on Discord. Am I cutting out?
No.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You can hear me, or you can't hear me?
Coming through loud.
Okay, cool. I mean, so fine. Okay, perfect. I mean, the people that you're talking to, Stops, are like a particular Christian that I know on Discord, right? That only believes in the book of Matthew, that disbelieves in 80%, his words, not mine, 80% of the Bible, and doesn't believe Jesus was resurrected, but calls himself a Christian. So the Muslims that you're talking about are some version of that.
Correct.
I kid you not. I am being deadly serious. I'm sure Thunderous would be face palming that somebody could call themselves a Christian. But that's what we're talking about from Muslims.
But if you recall, a couple of weeks ago, we had that discussion where I said it was the books that define the religion, not the people. Like the Quran defines Islam, not Muslims, and we had a bit of a to-do about that. That a person doesn't have to believe all of it to call himself a Muslim. And that's where I disagree, and I'm totally in agreement with you there, Robs. The Quran defines Islam, not Muslims. In the same way that, you're right. I just did literally a facepalm when you said a guy believed in the book of Matthew, and basically abandons the rest of the book and doesn't even believe in the resurrection. There is no Christianity in that at all. Even the Apostle Paul says there's no Christianity in that, because he says if there is no resurrection, let's eat and drink, for tomorrow we will die. Absolutely bang on point there. But then when we're talking about the inheritance with Islam, we're talking about numerical things. And numeracy is not Islam's strong point, which I'll bring out later, or I can do it now, because when you brought this to my attention several years ago, Stops, that's what motivated me to look into other numerical discrepancies within Islam that I brought out on the show I think last year now, when we consider 123,999 prophets sequentially. How many prophets was that per generation when you consider from Adam all the way to Muhammad? That works out at about 2,500 prophets or messengers per generation. Then the number of years between Adam and Muhammad. Some Muslims will say 1,000,000 years or 300,000 years, but let's take 1,000,000 as an example. That works out each generation by going from the Islamic tree of genealogy. Each person has lived 3,000 years before they died, on average. Then you've got the other numerical discrepancy, which is Adam was 90 foot tall, and if you go and remember, because I did the 5 foot decreasement per generation, you have people like Abraham that are still 40 foot tall. So numbers are not Islam's strong suit, and the inheritance law is just another, if you like, byproduct of the numerical discrepancies that are contained within Islam. You have to go through some mental gymnastics or cognitive dissidence to come out of this and still claim to be a Muslim. Once you know, I mean, that's why I think a lot of Muslims stay in ignorance. Two reasons. One, they stay in ignorance because they don't want to tackle the difficulties of Islam. Or the other one is, it's not the Islam that keeps people as Muslims. It's more the culture and the pride of the community that makes people fearful leaving it.
I can vouch for that. Yeah.
Yeah. But the reason that Stops and I think this is so good is just because there's no escape route with other apologetics that we've heard. And it's once you get down to it, it's not difficult to add this up with the scenario of the family that Stops has put forward with 3 daughters, husband, wife, and father. So father, mother, sorry, obviously the husband's dead. So 3 daughters, it's a father, mother, and wife, right? That's 6 people in the family. You can use those 2 verses and you get to the scenario, and there's no way out of this. And it's fascinating as an exercise to see the psychology of somebody who's making a claim that their book cannot have errors. They're presented with a straightforward error that we can see here that there's no escape from. And how does the mental gymnastics go? And I think, Stops, you mentioned Kenny Boma's in the chat. So, like, how is that mental gymnastics? Somebody like that will probably just say that, we're ignorant. They won't address it at all, right? And that's another response. Just avoid, like Adnan Rashid, just avoid dealing with this topic at all. Just, call out the speakers for their ignorance, but don't address the topic.
You can't see the chat, right?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay, then
driving?
you should start another a day job, maybe as a prophet, because that's exactly what he's doing. He's saying, we don't know what we're talking about. We should get a knowledgeable Muslim on here because we don't know what we're talking about. And now this is why this is why I cannot understand why so many Muslims are so bloody in, like, that. It's unbelievable how dishonest, how disingenuous, how, like, totally stupid they are. I've just explained it like 2 seconds ago, that there are 2 methods that these are normally used to explain. There's 2 methods. And he's saying, well, yeah, look, what you haven't done is looked at the second method. I've just fucking explained the second method. I've already showed that this doesn't work. I've already demonstrated that this is stupid, it is dishonest, and it's fallacious. And now Kenny Boma comes in and says, oh, you guys don't know what you're doing. Why don't you look at the reduction method? Unbelievable, really. How stupid does Islam make a brain? Really, I don't understand it.
It's not necessarily Islam making the brain stupid. It's the fear of letting it go that makes people stupid.
Yeah, but come on, Faye, you should at least be honest. You should at least be straight. You should be able to say, okay, oops,
They can't.
Houston, we have a problem.
When you're so intellectually bankrupt, it's difficult for you to be honest.
Yeah, but why are you intellectually bankrupt?
Because you're not allowed to leave this faith. You're not allowed to say, oh, I don't know what that is.
So that's exactly it. It's Islam. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Well, for starters, when you have a hadith that says that if you leave Islam, if a person leaves his religion, kill him. So in a Muslim majority country or in a Muslim majority community, there are real life repercussions. In a Muslim controlled country, it's the death penalty. In a strong Muslim community, it's emotional blackmail and ostracism, because you're bringing shame on the family, you're bringing shame on the community, because you're basically saying that this religion is not true when you leave it, because as the phrase goes, actions speak louder than words. But and I've said this before, and I remember the conversation with the apostate prophet when he came and joined the
Oh,
What
someone's
happened?
cut out. Thunderous,
Thunderous
cut
has suddenly
out.
gone.
culture that is stronger than the religion, and people can't leave the culture because, for starters, if you leave the culture, you've become westernized, you've joined the white man's religion, so the race card is played. The emotional blackmail that takes place from families because of the disrespect and dishonor you bring and the shame you're bringing on the family. That's not religious, that's culture. Sorry?
Ridvan's in the chat. Apostate
Oh,
prophet.
hello. Yeah. Hello. Welcome, AP. You've been taken to task. Okay, let's just quickly finish it. I just want to show people what we're talking about. The reduction method does not work because it says here for parents a 6th share of the inheritance. It doesn't say of the remainder of what has been inherited by the others, and you get this. It says of the inheritance. You just need to read the Quran and not change the Quran. That's how easy it is.
Hey, apostate. I was thinking, apostate, now that you're here and listening to the show, it might be a good, I'm proposing this to you, it might be a good discussion to have one time about how the culture plays a strong role on people, why they are fearful of leaving Islam rather than just Islam itself. So it'd be good to hear what your thoughts on that as a separate sideshow discussion.
Yeah. And look here, no Muslims here, just people spreading hatred. Kenny, you're the only one spreading hatred.
Can I
These
You are the
people,
Muslim. You
these people need to look up what the word hatred actually means. It's as though hatred. You see, this is my problem with Islam as well. They use words, and when they use it, it's almost like the word doesn't mean what it actually means anymore. Islam reinvents the word for it to mean something else. Disagreeing with something doesn't mean to say you hate it. That means you disagree with it for some logical, emotional, psychological reason, not
look. He
because.
can
says
I
of the. Sorry,
can I respond to
I
that really
thought you were
quickly?
finished.
Like, I think that the hatred that Kenny is referring to is the fact that you guys keep calling him stupid. Like, I don't know what your experience with Kenny is. I don't know him. I have no beef with him. I don't know what he is. But Kenny, they've very obviously, like, over the last hour and 15 minutes, we've been talking about the same thing. We've gone through each step. There is clearly discrepancy in the Quran, and you're just willingly overlooking it and calling it hatred. I don't think that that's what this is. We're just looking at a verse and trying to understand it. That's it.
Yeah. And Apostate, exactly. We can definitely have that. We have to understand that Muslims honestly believe that they believe in the right thing, that they believe in the right thing. It requires a lot of empathy. Yes, I agree with you 100%. But then if somebody is obnoxious and condescending and arrogant, and then still comes and says, after we've showed exactly the steps that Faye has just referred to, and then still says, we are spreading hatred by quoting the Quran, it doesn't work. There's something wrong. There's a disconnect here, because we're not hating, we're not doing anything. We're just reading what it says in the Quran. We're just taking the words that we are reading, and we are saying, well, it's clear, it's no doubt, it's very well explained. Everything is very, easily laid out to you, everything. And then we see, well, the parents get a sixth each, and then the mother still gets an eighth after the inheritance is completely subscribed. So the entire inheritance, if the daughters get two-thirds are gone. And then it says the rest is a sixth of the inheritance. It doesn't say of the remainder of the inheritance. So people like Boma are changing the Quran. And this is what I find disgusting. And then coming to us and saying, we are spreading hate if we don't agree to that. That is what is so terrible.
Kenny's just said, and I'm going to ignore the first part because we didn't say that. But he said, claiming that you understand things that Muslims don't is hatred. No, it isn't, because I was a Muslim. I have the experience of being a Muslim. Understanding something that other people don't understand is in no way hatred. It's just understanding something.
And can I just say on top of that, from what Faye said, you've got two ex-Muslims on the show from two different cultures, two different backgrounds, two different languages, and two different sexes coming to the same conclusion. Read it and weep.
And I'm neither. I'm just taking the words that I don't understand, but which God tells me I must understand, because he said they are easy to understand. There is no doubt in the entire book. And yet this is full of nonsense.
And clearly this level of disagreement is evidence enough that this isn't a divine message. You have different types of inheritance, first of all, and second of all, you have four people running around trying to understand two verses.
And we've done this. We've been to knowledgeable Muslims. We've tried asking these questions to knowledgeable Muslims, and they don't have an answer. Now, you are a liar. You've lied like so many times, it's unbelievable. Every time you open your mouth, you lie. Why should I now believe anything that you are saying after all the lies you've distributed? And then you come and say, well, yeah, it's our fault. Stay away from Islam. Yeah. Thank you, Apostate Prophet, for popping in.
Thank you for joining us.
Hey,
come on. Yeah, but this would be nice to have another show exactly on the topic that Thunder has said, just to do this.
Yeah, I think that's quite an important thing to actually cover as a separate show. That and it might be an encouragement to the Muslims that are listening to the show, that speaking from experience that Faye and I have, that it's something that really hinders people and holds them back is the emotional and psychological impact that it has on the family when when you start questioning the religion of peace, because it's certainly not peace when you want to leave it.
So Kenny's just said that ex-Muslims take the easy road, and I am just immeasurably angry at that comment. Do you know
It's
what
so
I
weird.
had to do to leave Islam? Like, do you understand? Remaining a Muslim and remaining in denial is way easier than leaving it. Leaving it is not something simple. You don't just go from A to B. I had to leave my whole family. I had to leave my home. I had to leave the area that I live in. I had to get in contact with the police, with the social workers. I can't go back to my country from which I'm from. I'm an immigrant to this country. I cannot go back to my old country for fear of lynching. Like, I am afraid of the mob. I can't rejoin my old community. Like, how dare you claim that it's being an ex-Muslim is the easy road? In what context is it easy? Please explain to me.
He can't explain that, faith, because he doesn't have that experience. To understand how to be an ex-Muslim, you have to be an ex-Muslim. You know, it's a bit like me trying to understand what it's like to be a woman. I don't. I'm a man. So for somebody like Kenny, even if he was to leave Islam, he cannot really rightfully claim that he was ever an ex-Muslim in the sense that you and I can make the statement, because we've come from a cultural identity that is Islamic. He's just a Mickey Mouse token convert that's probably jumped on Islam because it's given him a, if you like, a springboard to have a voice. Because prior to being a Muslim, he was probably silent because he's probably an attention seeker.
Hey,
You know?
Kenny, you saying it boils down to a lack of desire to pray and your inclinations to do whatever you want. I had an inclination to pray. I would be the first one up in my house to do Fajr. I would be the last one to go to bed because I would pray Tahajjud. Don't come to me and try to figure out why I left Islam when you have no idea who I am. I'm so immeasurably angry at you. You think that it's easier to leave Islam, okay, leave praying 5 times a day and doing nothing else but worshipping Allah and then trying to make a life for yourself. You think this is easier than doing that 5 times a day, wasting your time going up and down on the floor.
And Scarlet Fox is saying ignorance is bliss. It's much easier to be a Muslim than an ex-Muslim. And that is so true, because you don't need to think. You don't need to do anything. You just obey. You follow instructions.
Everything is
That's
done
all.
for you. Everything is done for you as a Muslim. You don't need to make up your mind about anything. Allah tells you how to do everything in your damn life, even if you have to make up the bullshit, as we've just seen with these inheritance verses, even if you have to make it up as you go along. Nothing about leaving Islam is easy. Especially, it's hard enough in the UK, but in 14 countries where there is the death penalty for leaving, it's even harder. So I don't know where you get off by saying that leaving Islam is easier than staying a Muslim.
And so, Tujana, Kenny Burma in a live controlled debate, we've seen what happens. He totally fails. He changes the topic. He does every trick in the book, and then he still fails because he cannot handle facts. He cannot think. All he can do is lie. And this is what we see again and again. And we see it now.
Kenny, you can go on about me drinking all you want. Okay, I'm a 24-year-old woman. I'm in the UK. It's legal for me to drink. And I've never experienced it before I left Islam. Now, you can go on about the entire time. We're not talking about that. We're talking about your claim that leaving Islam, being an ex-Muslim, is easier than being a Muslim. And your only thing that you have said is that it's out of laziness. Laziness is what makes it easy.
No, that's
I'm
terrible.
sorry, but nothing else about my life is easier. Nothing about my life is easier since leaving Islam. Okay, I could have gone on being a sheep and it would have been super easy for me to do that. Probably would have been in the ground by now, considering the type of person my father was. But it would have been easier for me to follow than change.
Can I just say, on top of that, just to confirm what Faye's saying, my family own a martial arts club in the town that I live in. So it's not as if we're not, I'm not familiar with violence or anything like that, or what bravado is. And I'll say that amongst people on this planet, the bravest people I know are female ex-Muslims. That's a certainty to stand and be counted for leaving a faith, knowing the repercussions that take place when you leave it. I can't think of a situation in life that is braver than a woman that's left Islam.
Thank you.
And Sota Jana, consider Islam is trending. Buy it online. Well, let me just give you a quick
Zakir Naik is
example.
buying it for
Kenny-
people, bitch.
Kenny
Zakir Naik
came-
pays people to come to Islam all the time.
Kenny came and said, well, if you buy another book, which I have here somewhere, if you buy this, I will send you this book, Consider Islam, for free. Because I asked him, are you going to give me an evaluation copy and I will do, run a critique? And he says, no, but if you buy this book by this other author, then I will do this. Guess what happened? He hasn't sent
What?
it. He only said to me, I need to fulfill one condition. I need to buy the other book. And he's been running from this ever since then. He has never lived up to his promise that he will send me this book. He never did.
Okay. I just told you that I work 3 jobs to maintain the lifestyle that I have right now because I don't have any family support. Would you consider sending it to me for free? Because I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to monetarily support you. But if you're willing to send it to me for free, I'll read it.
He promised me that he will send it to me for free. He never did. And look what he says now. I'm not sending out here. Let me hold it. I'm not sending you a book until you apologize privately or otherwise. Okay? Here's my apologize. Here's me apologizing to you. Fuck you, Kenny Bowman.
Oh.
You're a lying
Yes!
asshole. You're a despicable. You are horrible. And you think that I'm ever going to apologize for anything for your dishonest? Fucking hell.
Go off,
This is,
sis.
yes, this is such an asshole, really. And he comes here and then he thinks he can taunt us with this inane stupidity, really. Unbelievable.
People like Kenny Boma suffer from a strange form of attention deficit disorder.
Yeah.
They start behaving disorderly when there's a deficit in the amount of attention they get.
I can't.
Okay, I think we've understood that there's a problem here in the Quran in chapter number 4, sentence number 11. And if we go to number 12 and we combine the two, and we see what it says here, that Allah instructs you, Allah is ever knowing and wise, we see that this is not true. If we go to 12 and combine this, Allah is knowing and forbearing. No, he's not. So this book was not written by any Allah. This book was written by human beings, by stupid, ignorant human beings who don't know what they are doing. They didn't know how fractions work, and they never applied it. This is the problem. And they should have checked it first, and they didn't. And this is the result.
Well, I guess when Muhammad was revealing things, he kind of had to do it on the spot a lot because everything is very situational with him. His entire life was a situational comedy, a horrifying one. But
if I was being generous, I would say that this is just another evidence that this is a book with many hands at work. Because if there was any truth that Muhammad existed, unless if we go a little bit along with the narrative that he was a traveling salesman and a businessman, I don't think a businessman who couldn't read or write would have made this numerical error. This, to me, is an example of perhaps there's a certain truth that the Quran is a compilation of many hands at work.
And what is quite funny that on Facebook I wrote a little, like a short story where I said there was this really brutal, narcissistic, despotic king, and he wanted his people to fight for him. And I came up with a story, and this was, I don't know, 10 lines maybe. And boy, am I getting flack for this, because for some odd reason, now I don't mention Muhammad, I don't mention God, I don't mention anything. I just said that here's this king who a long time ago wanted this, and this is what he told his people. This is what happens to them if they do this, and if they don't, then it's like this. And for some odd reason, Muslims immediately identify this as Islam. And they immediately identify this despotic king as being Allah. I don't know why. And they immediately see these things, and then they attack me for their interpretation of my story. This is so funny. I think I should collect all the comments and then we can talk about this here as a segment, because it's really hilarious.
Oh,
So this is exactly the reaction that you get if you go and tell people the story about Islam. This is, and Thunderous just prompted this with his comment. Come on, it's so obvious that there are so many people at work here. The language changes. Last week we came across all these different forms in the grammar. Different people said and wrote different things, and this is the way that it works. This is it's so obvious. And yet I'm sure when Thunderous and when Faye were reading this, when they were still Muslims, they were not aware of that.
No, you're absolutely right. I was not made aware of this numerical discrepancy until I saw your video several years ago. Up until that point, I wasn't aware, because I think it's just one of those things, as you've just said there. You read it and you don't think to yourself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try and mathematically work this out. You just wouldn't do that.
When you just sort of superimpose the idea that this is divine and it's all correct, you don't really look into it. Like when I was a Muslim, I didn't really view a lot of content that was like anti-Islamic sort of thing. Like I didn't really go into all the content that was like the contradictions in the Quran. I mainly just watched Zakir Naik videos and how the Quran's brilliant and scientific in every sort of way. And then after I left Islam, I realized that man is a moron and he doesn't know anything. He's just very charismatic. So when you accept something as divine and truthful, you don't really look into what discrepancies it might have because you've already have that idea in your brain.
So, but when you were a believer, you took the Quran as the word of a God, single God. The author of the book was a God.
Mm-hmm.
And it went through the single source of Muhammad, but you were told that there was an error checking mechanism, that there were angels constantly checking that it was the correct version, that it was, everything was said the right way. And if there were two ways, well, then it wasn't so important, blah, blah, blah. But this is how you were taught about the Quran, isn't it?
Yeah. And when Abu Bakr or Uthman, if memory serves me correctly, when the Quran was consolidated, all the other sort of versions or the accents that people read it in were burnt so that there was only one version.
Right. And this was then protected.
Yeah.
And this is what you believed. So nobody can come and say, well, you have always been mocking the Quran. No, you were not. You were treating it with reverence. And I'm sure that, I mean, I don't know whether you, when you had your period, did you touch the Quran?
No, when I was on my period, I would never touch the Quran. Some scholars would say that you weren't even supposed to recite it. You were just filthy. And back before I started like properly practicing, if we dropped the Quran, we would actually kiss it as like an apology. But after I started practicing, I realized that was like bid'ah. That wasn't you weren't supposed to do that. It's a book after all. You're meant to treat it with reverence, but at the end of the day, it's not, it's not created. So it's not something that you need to apologize to for dropping.
Yeah, exactly. So it's quite weird that somebody will say, well, now that you're an ex-Muslim, you always had it in your heart. Your heart was always like tainted and you've always wanted to, find hatred within you or something like that. It's quite strange for me. It's quite weird.
If Allah's real and Islam is real, and on the Day of Judgment, Allah tries to put that to me, I will have a serious disagreement with him.
Yeah, I can believe that. Yeah.
People can vouch for me. I went to an Islamic school. I have connections with Muslims who I still talk to from my previous life. They can vouch that I was the most practicing of my year group. I would continually go to like duxis and mosques, and I would, take part in trivia quizzes and win money at mosques every single week because I was the best in that year. And I'm not saying that I'm a scholar or I'm the most knowledgeable of all Muslims. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I had a genuine interest in Islam. I had a reverence for the Quran, and I deeply, deeply worshipped Allah. And I just I hate it when other people who have no idea who I am, who've only known me for, an hour and 34 minutes, if that, come along and say, well, you always wanted to sin, as if Muslims don't sin anyway. I did my best to be the most practicing Muslim I could, and it just wasn't enough. The religion was not something that was true, so I had to leave it. That's how people should process ideas. If it doesn't fit you, you're meant to leave. That's the thing.
But the thing is, you see, but what Muslims tend to forget as well is that Allah guides whom He wants, and Allah misguides whom He wants, and Allah opens the hearts, if you like, of those who believe and those who don't believe. So a person can't believe unless it's by the will of Allah, and a person becomes a disbeliever because that is by the will of Allah. So anybody who claims that we are anti-Islam or anti-this and the other, they're fighting against the will of the will of their Allah, because that's been decreed by their Allah in the first place. So we're only reacting in the way that Allah wants us to react, because He's decreed it. So if we're ex-Muslims for a reason, it is the reason because of Allah in the first place. He's the reason why we're ex-Muslim. That should be their default.
I like that Kenny is playing a semantics game. I'm in the UK. They could be charged for murder if they killed me, you idiot.
No, you can just ignore him, really, because he's going downhill now, because now he's getting drunk, and this is why the comments are going to get really bad now.
Oh, I love it when they start playing a semantics game instead of addressing the actual point. The point was, you said that it's more difficult to be a Muslim than an ex-Muslim. I'm still waiting for you to prove that.
There's nothing that he can ever provide evidence for. It's the funny thing. I mean, he can't even add up. The Quran tells you to add up, and he doesn't do it because he can't. Because if he does add up, if he would be an honest person, any honest Muslim who looks at these chapters, he looks at these sentences in chapter number 4 and follows exactly what it says in the Quran, must come to the conclusion that there's a huge problem here. And that's... but most are not honest, unfortunately. Okay, is there anything else that we want to do in this? Are we done with this? I think 4:11 and 4:12.
I swear.
They're very unclear.
Stops. I'm telling you now, man. Benny wants to fucking marry me. Like, I don't know what's going on.
What? Wait, is he saying that?
No,
he's an idiot anyway. I mean, Benny is the most immoral person. He shouldn't be on this planet, really. This is the kind of persons we don't need on this planet, really. It's amazing how bad he is. So anyway, for parents, we can see it's of the inheritance. It says here, it's very, very clear. What I don't understand is how all this not whether your parents, and you don't know what you're doing, you don't understand what is going on, and this is why Allah is going to tell you how to do it, and then he screws up the whole thing. This is somebody I have not seen yet. Bandem Swadika. The problem is most Muslims not only follow but also hadith and what the scholars say. And this is the point. This is what I tried to explain in the beginning. What the Quran says, general stuff, and this is then outlined and detailed and blah 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 in number one the tafsir, but mostly in the hadith. But the problem is the hadith contradicts the Quran. And there is a very, very clear regulation that says if there is a contradiction, it's clearly the Quran that has precedence, that has superiority. The authority of the Quran is higher than that of the Sunnah. And here it's very clear that if you have 3 daughters, the share is 2/3. Their share is 2/3 of the entire inheritance. Now, the way that Muslims work, the way that Sharia works, the way that the scholars work, the way that the Sunnah works, this is reduced. So if you have even the simplest of examples, it doesn't work. The share is not 2/3, the share is less. It's, 2/5 or whatever it is. And therefore, this is not according to the Quran. You cannot have it both ways. Either you follow the Sunnah or you follow the Quran. But if you agree that the Quran has a higher authority, you have to make the share 2/3, and then it doesn't work. because you have the parents a sixth share of the inheritance, not of what is left of the 2/3, but of the entire inheritance. And it works up until here. So they have 2/3 for the daughters and 1/3 for the father and the mother. But that's it. If you have a wife, it doesn't work. If you have any other person, be it sister, brother, it doesn't work. So it looks like the people who wrote this did not know how to handle fractions. They were just copying somebody wrote something down and said, well, it could be this and this and this. And then people, instead of working with this, simply copied it. And this is the problem in Islam. Islam teaches you what to think and not how to think. Because if Islam would teach you how to think, you would immediately see there is a problem here. But we have two ex-Muslims here who said, look, when we were Muslims, we didn't see this. Because in Islam, you are taught what to think. And there they tell you Allah knows best, and this is what you accept, you obey. And it's only when you're an ex-Muslim you realize, oh shit, there's actually something wrong here. And this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to understand the Quran. We're trying to see, what does the Quran actually say? Is it true what the Quran says, that it is inerrant? Is it true that it's explained? Is it true that there is no doubt? Is it true that everybody can understand this and that everybody can follow this? And we are finding no. And it doesn't matter where. Every single week when we read the Quran, we have exactly the same problem, that it doesn't make sense. I don't think we've had a single week where we've been through sentences and we said, yeah, this is clear, this is clear, this is clear, this is clear. I don't think there's been even one.
Nope.
No.
I think the only time the verses are clear is when they're short and they're talking about Allah, because there's not really much to be less clear about, where he's talking about his punishment, or he's talking about his mercy, or he's just being...
There is a clear verse, that Surah 3:138, and that destroys the claim that everything else is clear.
Yep.
So that's self-contradictory, self-defeating, isn't it? This is a plain book or a plain statement for all men, for all people.
Okay, this is
So
in
it refutes itself.
Imran 138. Let me quickly bring this up just so that people remember just to understand what we're talking about, okay? It says here, this book, this Quran, this recitation is a clear statement to all the people and a guidance and instruction for those conscious of Allah. So if you have any kind of inclination towards believing that there is a God or something, then you should be very, very clear with what the book says. And it's for all the people. So all the people should understand that this is clear, and then the people who are with the God should see this as guidance. Now, how can it be clear and guidance? Now, what is the guidance of 4:11, where it says that the inheritance of the parents is a sixth of the entire estate if he left children, or for parents of the inheritance if the deceased left children? What is the guidance if I say, well, if I do that, what the Quran tells me to do, I see that there's a mistake. So there's something wrong here. You can't take 138 in chapter 3 and say it's clear, it's obvious, and it's guidance for everybody, guidance for those who tend to have a God in their brains, and then you see this, a total mess. How does this work? It doesn't work. Something does not fit together. Well, if anybody has any idea, please come and talk to us. If you're knowledgeable, not if you're like these people in the chat now. But if anybody has an idea, anybody wants to talk to us, please do so. I mean, we are open. We're not, we don't hate Muslims. We don't do any of what some people come up with excuses as. No.
It would be nice to have like an honest conversation about this instead of like just a screaming match. Well, the last time on the Discord server, it was just a screaming match between like 6 people. it would be nice to just have a like, oh, I don't know this, but maybe it could mean this, like a genuine conversation. But I feel like that's so difficult to come by because people get so amped up about these, a statement in a book.
The other thing, Faye, is that they don't actually understand what their own book is saying. And that's the majority of the people I've spoken to. Either they're ignorant of it, which is fine. I mean, I don't expect every Muslim to know everything about their book, although that would be good. But they when they attempt to read this, they don't actually understand those two verses. And these are Muslims who are coming up with this idea. The other one, as I said, was the two guys that Stops and I spoke to, and that was on Discord as well, I think. Where they just said, hey, there's an if statement there. That means that it's a completely different scenario. They're just not able to understand what is being read there. And so for them, it's kind of, in a sense, willful ignorance. I don't think they are like ignorant people, but they hear the statement and then the brain shuts down. Well, there we go. I've answered it. I'm not going to investigate this any further. It's done. They won't go look at the scholars or what other people say or anything like that. They've come up with some contrived, interpretation, and that's it. It's end of it. It's exactly what Stop says.
And you're right, because look, this is what the people at the time understood. They are just copying what it says. The share of the male and the female, this is what is being decreed here in this sentence. And this is what Allah expounds you concerning your children. So he's just repeating, this is what the people understood what the Quran is saying.
Stops. A couple of weeks ago, this is a little off topic. A couple of weeks ago, someone said that Ibn Abbas is inauthentic or something like that. I'm not sure if you want to stop using Ibn Abbas because of that.
Well, I can't take him out of here, and I'm not going to go.
Why would we go on what somebody says that?
Exactly, just because somebody says it's unreliable. Ibn Abbas is somebody who is revered by most Muslims, okay?
Yeah,
so if somebody tells me that, I mean, it's the same thing with the Sahih International translation. People tell me, well, this is the Saudi translation and you need to ignore it. Well, I'm sorry, there's a lot of people who go and use this exactly because it's more clear than the others. The same goes for Ibn Abbas. There's a lot of Muslims who say, yes, he is, it could be whatever, but at least he makes sense. And if the Muslims are telling me that, then I will take this. And if some person then says, well, it's not that clear and maybe there is an agenda here, well, so be it.
Okay. It's just
like anything, though, they need to provide their evidence, right? Why is he unreliable? And if we think he's unreliable, because we're critics, right? We're not going to say, no, he's not unreliable. If the evidence is there, that's fine. We can ditch Ibn Abbas. It's not the problem. But you need the evidence.
Yeah.
And look at this. This is what makes me so angry when handling Muslims.
I'm gonna ignore that comment. I'm not gonna bother.
You realize technically you've never been reading the Quran, just the translation. What the fuck have we been doing in the beginning?
Well, that's a self-defeating statement, isn't it? Because if that's the case, every English speaker has never read the Quran, in which case they shouldn't be Muslims. We're done.
Well, no Indonesian Muslim, no Indian Muslim. I mean, 99% of Muslims they've never studied ancient Arabic. But the problem is we read the Quran in the original Arabic in the beginning. So what the hell are we still supposed to do? And he says, well, you didn't read it in Arabic. Yes, we did. You fuckhead. My goodness.
That's not even
self-defeating.
It's not even a requirement that Allah makes. That's just a get-out clause. I've always seen that as a get-out clause. We've got a problem here, so I'll use a default argument of you've got to read it in Arabic. Because that principle they apply there, they do not apply to any other holy writing. They don't apply it in Hebrew to the Bible, or Greek to the Bible, or Sanskrit to Hinduism, or any other language for any other religion. They just apply it to Islam.
And this is it.
Yeah, it's just a weak apologetic, right? Because otherwise it would mean, if they were consistent, that no English speakers ever read the true Quran, in which case they shouldn't be Muslim until they learn Arabic, understand the true Quran in Arabic, and then convert.
And this is the question that we should be asking. The Quran itself claims to be final, clear, concise message for all mankind by God. Why would your perfect God make his revelation in a language that most people don't speak? That's the whole thing in a nutshell. That's exactly it. And this is the point. In fact, no one speaks the dialect of Arabic that the Quran was revealed in anymore. It's a dead
And that
language.
is actually so true. No one
Yeah.
speaks Fusha Arabic anymore.
And this is nice. The Quran might as well be written in Klingon. Same thing, same difference, exactly. Because hardly anybody reads it. And the funny story is, if you want to be a Muslim now, nobody's going to ask you, have you studied ancient Arabic? Have you read the fine print? Do you understand the repercussions, the consequences? No. You just have to go, la ilaha illallah, and you're a Muslim. You don't speak a word of ancient Arabic, and you're a Muslim. It's only when you start critiquing it, when you start thinking, that's when you need to study, and you have to go crazy and become a scholar before you're allowed to say anything negative. So,
Yeah, weak apologetic. We can ignore that.
yeah, but I need to show, we need to address this every single time, because otherwise people are going to say, yeah, but look, these are the things. You're not even addressing the contentions and that are being thrown at you. Well,
Stops.
the thing is, it gets
But, like,
boring after a while.
Stops. Before you got me on the show, you had no Arabic speaker, right? You had no Arabic, someone who could read Arabic.
No, we did, because Hassan used to join us.
Oh, okay. Hassan Radwan.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And
Huh,
we
okay.
had several Arabic speakers. Yeah, because we had what happened to Abu? Because Abu used to be here, because we used to be here every single week, and he's a native speaker.
Okay. Well, then you've had Arabic speakers on the show. So what is he talking about?
This is the point. It's being disingenuous.
Oh God. Okay.
But even if you had other Arabic speakers, as you said, they're not. They weren't brought up with the original Arabic, and they will have an interpretation into English of what they mean. Why should we take any other Arab speaker, whether it's our dear friend Abu or yourself or anybody else, over what the translations like Yusuf Ali or Pickthall was said? What is the credentials of anybody else claiming, no, I can better interpret it than these linguists who are worldwide accepted?
Stops. Can we highlight the most recent comment from Sud to Jannah, just because?
Yeah, I didn't want to do it because this is.
Please do, because he keeps saying,
can you read it?
You know, Muslims come into the chat. Muslims come into the chat and they keep saying that we hate on Muslims when we don't. We're just talking about the Quran. And here we have a Muslim clearly hating on Hindus, not on Hinduism, on Hindus.
And this is personal as well, because we had somebody asking the question, why is it that a God would reveal his most important work in a language that nobody speaks? Which is a very valid question. It's a logical question. It's reasonable. It's rational. Everything makes sense about it. And now a apologist comes here and says, you idiot, stick to Hindu history, aka eating cow dung and sacrificing your woman to funeral fires. The classical Arabic is understood by most apart from a few words, aka Fey. This is
okay. Okay. Can I just clarify something? I'm from a Bangladeshi background. My family does not know Arabic. I studied Arabic for 5 years because I wanted to understand the Quran. Okay, most of the Muslim world does not understand Arabic.
Can I just say, we'll be discussing this when we get the ayah that talks about produce a surah like it. The language thing will have its own discussion when we get to the surah that challenges, well, produce a surah like it. And I think we'll be going a little bit more into language and the challenges that the Muslims make about this having to read it in classical Arabic, which is just nothing more than a default. Because it stops. What's the ayah that talks about do not ask questions that will cause you trouble?
5101.
5101. Well, there you go. This is the problem that we have. Even Muhammad preempted it by having a revelation, knowing that questions will be asked by people that are going to cause problems to their faith and their belief in the Quran. So there's your preemption.
Just a quick note on the clarification. 1.3 people who can speak English and 600 Muslims. The numbers are actually very different. If you look at the total number of Muslims, which is anything between 1 and 1.5 billion, a very, very small percentage and we're talking about something like, I think it's 8% actually are native Arabic speakers, and only, okay, I need to 0.0001% have actually studied ancient Quranic Arabic, because it's only like 150 million or something.
Yep.
Or 15 million. So it's a lot less than this with the Arabic.
And there's a certain condemnation or damning indictment in all of this as well, because when people are being criticized or challenging Islam, for instance, they'll turn around and say, well, you haven't read it in Arabic. But the one that's making the comment about the criticism that they're receiving doesn't read Arabic themselves. Then they don't know as much as the critic about Islam and what the Quran contains. So when you're talking to somebody who is a critic of Islam, he normally 9 out of 10 times knows more about the Quran than the Muslim himself in any discussion given. So I never quite understood as to what the argument is that a Muslim can have, or somebody claiming to be Muslim, when somebody is challenging the narrative or Muhammad or the Quran. Because they don't speak Arabic, they don't know that much about the contents of the Quran, and they don't know that much about the culture of Islam or indeed its history.
Yeah.
And people are ex-Muslim or critics of Islam because they've actually done the very thing that a Muslim's supposed to do, which is read Islam, read the Quran, and read the Hadith.
And here we have India, Pakistan. I mean, this is the best example. If you take the high population countries, they make up the majority and they don't speak Arabic. So this whole point is moot, really.
It's
Indonesia. Indonesia, isn't that the greatest density of Muslims per capita?
Yes. Yeah. And this is also in Indonesia. I mean, if you have this huge divide, okay, east, west, south, north, where some mosques, for example, have a female imam. There is no segregation. There's nothing. And then on the other hand, if you go to Aceh and places like that, there it's heavily segregated. Their men and women aren't even allowed to look at each other, or they're being punished with I don't know, with beating and flogging and public this and that. It's crazy. So Indonesia in itself is split. Okay, I don't think it's worth starting anything else.
No, I was just going to say that I have to go and join a different stream right now.
Yeah, I think that was
Oh my
good, because
goodness.
now we've dedicated a whole show to this. So anybody can come and watch this and they can go through this, and we can move on. And like I say, for us as a closing shot, if you're an intellectually honest Muslim, I cannot see how you can possibly come up with an answer if you believe the Quran is inerrant and you believe any modification of the Quran is prohibited, and this is a book from God. If you believe those three things, there is a problem for you.
All right, guys. Take it easy, take care, and if anybody does find that there's something that we've done wrong, please let us know. I'd really like to know about it.
Just before you go, Stops, are you in contact with the apostate prophet?
Not on a daily basis, no.
Okay, it's just that it might be a good idea to maybe plan something in the future to talk about leaving Islam, with Fabian on the panel as well now, about the difficulties it is for leaving Islam, but also from a point of view of culture and women.
He actually recently told his parents that he'd left Islam.
Yeah.
Well, he was on the show, and we had him for 2 hours, and he was talking about this.
Yeah.
What happened to the after show? Oh, we're getting lazy.
We can go to the Discord server if you want. Up to you.
Is anybody interested in chatting on the Discord server?
Especially if you're a Muslim that wants to have a conversation, apart from Benny because he's banned. But
Yeah, please,
anybody else
no,
can go there.
No, he's really bad. Oh my God. Is this week just these two verses? Yes, because now
Yeah,
we've been
sorry.
talking about it for 2 hours, and now to go for another one, this is too much. We can go next week. Please give us a thumbs up. Tell us how much you love us, and then we shall meet again next Friday. I missed the after show. Okay, then let's do an after show. I can still stay awake an hour. Faye will have to leave us and love us.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us about your sex life. Tell us.
Why?
Because you're off on a okay. Have fun. See you next week.
Are you going
Next
to an
week.
after show, Stops?
Yeah.
You need to give people the link, though.
Oh dear. Oh goodness me. This is now you're making me work.
I was going to
Discord.
ask, am I allowed to say which stream I'm heading to next, or is that not part of the
Of course.
I don't.
No, go for it.
So I'm going over to Tyler Preston's channel. We're going to be talking about something really low key, though. We're going to be talking about Batman.
Batman
if you
or
want
Fat Man.
to join us for that.
Did you say Batman?
It's certainly more interesting than this.
Is it a
There's
Fat Man?
less
Are you talking about
contradiction
a
in
Fat
Batman.
Man or the Batman?
No, the Batman, because I recently
Oh, okay.
watched all of the Dark Knight movies, like a week ago. So he wants to talk to me about that, because I was telling him, because I watched the Joker a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about that, and I told him that I'd never seen the Dark Knight movies, and he said, how have you never seen them? And I said, look, I was a fundamentalist for like 10 years. I didn't watch anything for 10 years, so all of my pop culture references end at like 2010 and then start again at like 2017. I have a gap of knowledge. So he wanted to talk about the Dark Knight. So that's where I'm going right now.
How do I get an invitation, Rob? After show voice. I'm there, but I don't know how to.
You've got to go to the top and say invite people.
On the top. On the top. Member list, pinned messages, muting. Invite people. Oh, there we go.
And then pop that link into the chat.
Copy. Close, chat, copy, paste. There we go. I hope this is the right one. But go to Discord, go to Gin and Tonic, and then go. I mean, I think most of you have been invited before, so you shouldn't. Yay! All right, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Speak
See you
soon, Rob.
next week. Give us a thumbs up, and hope to see you next week. Cheery, bye.
Bye.